Good evening. Welcome to the Majors and Quinn Facebook page and YouTube channel. My name is Annie. I'm the events coordinator at Majors and Quinn Booksellers, which, if you are not familiar with us, is an independent bookstore based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. If this is your first virtual event with us, welcome. If it's your seventh, welcome back. Thank you for always supporting the Majors and Quinn events program in all the forms it's taken, especially over the past couple years with our combination of virtual and in-person events. We can't do this without your support of viewing and supporting the authors and buying the books. So thanks a lot for being here. And tonight we are so privileged to be hearing from Kyyah Abdul, author of the book, The Prepared Graduate. So I hope that those of you out there watching are soon to be graduates. Hopefully you are making your way through your college career and you're planning ahead. And I hope that this book will be very helpful and illuminating for you. And we do have copies at Majors and Quinn if you happen to be in the Twin Cities area. Of course, you can come by the store. We're open 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. daily, or you can shop on our website. And I will put the link to the book on our website into the chat. Speaking of the chat, if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, use the chat or comments field to ask questions. Kyyah will be able to take questions this evening, so ask away. If you also just want to let us know where you're watching from, say hello, please do. It's always nice to see who's out there and who's tuning in. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our speaker this evening, and then you'll get to hear a little bit from The Prepared Graduate.
Thank you so much, Annie. I'm so happy to be here and I appreciate the opportunity. I think what's great about The Prepared Graduate is but for those who do go to college and have that opportunity, your whole point is to go and try and figure out like what you want to do after you finish. And I think people who graduated during the pandemic probably experienced this the hardest, similar to people who graduated through the 2008 recession. But just graduating in unknown times without having any proper guidance is so frustrating. So being plagued with a situation like COVID on top of the regular phenomenon that everyone graduates college is kind of like, what do I do? What do I achieve next? What job do I get? How do I negotiate a salary? I don't even know what a recruiter is or how to look for one. Do I go work in tech or do I go to grad school? So that was really the premise of me writing the book. And I think I really would like to read a little bit from chapter 7. And that's one of my favorite chapters because it just allows for me to reflect on where I was at an early stage in my educational development to where I am now. And I think also chapter 7 empowers a lot of people to realize that no matter the situation you're in right now, college students, for those watching, no matter the situation you're in right now, you will be able to get out of it. And there will be an opportunity for you to overcome it and be in the position that you're meant to be. I always say, or my favorite saying that I've just come up with is, do what you're supposed to do and try your hardest, and you will be led to the path that you're meant to prosper in. So if you're working to find a job and trying to figure out the next steps and diversifying your experience by trying a bunch of different things, you're going to end up landing where you're meant to be.
Yeah.
So without further ado, I guess I'll just go in and read a part of chapter 7.
Cool. And I'm going to go backstage, but I will be back to take questions. So everyone enjoy and think of your questions now.
Sure. So chapter 7 starts on page 151. I have the book right here. And it's called Savage Solitude. The quote underneath the title is, "No matter what accomplishments you make, somebody helped you." And that quote is by Alethea Gibson. The woman held up a white index card and asked, "Can you tell me what you see?" "I don't really see anything. It just looks like a black blob," I said. "Okay, what about this one?" I tilted my head to the right and said, "It kind of looks like a frog." She shuffled the cards and placed them on her desk. I wasn't sure why I was being asked to describe what I saw in ink blots. I sat in my chair quietly as she jotted notes into her fancy black notebook. "Rakaya, now I'm going to give you this test, and you're going to have 30 minutes to do your best, okay?" I replied softly, "Okay." At the end of the 30 minutes, I walked up to her desk and handed in the exam. As the woman marked up the test and jotted down more notes in her black notebook, I knew the outcome would be less than great because I didn't complete all the questions. The allotted amount of time wasn't long enough for me to read through all the questions. She asked me a few more evaluation questions and sent me back to class. My classmates inquired about where I went. I lied to save myself the embarrassment. I wasn't sure how to say I went to the special education building for an assessment. A few days passed before I was called up to my third grade teacher's desk. She told me to return to her classroom with my mom after school the following day. When my mom picked me up from school, I informed her of what my teacher requested. She acknowledged the request with a level of eagerness. I knew she wanted to know the outcome of the assessment. By the time I got to first grade, my mom had noticed the differences between my brilliant younger sister and me. We were 16 months apart, and my sister's cognitive advances always resulted in my parents questioning my development. By the time I reached second grade, teachers would tell my parents that while I was a delightful person to have in their classroom, I was behind compared to other children. Her reading comprehension is rather poor, teachers told my mom during parent-teacher conferences. At the start of third grade, my mother chose to be proactive by authorizing my elementary school to test my level of intelligence against the national average for children my age. The next morning, when my mom dropped me off at school, I hoped for the day to go by slowly. I hated the idea of sitting in a classroom with my teachers, a psychologist, and my mother only to discuss my intellectual deficiencies. When the last school bell rang, I walked over to my backpack hook to give off the impression that I was headed home with the rest of my peers. I walked from the classroom to the front of the school and back to my teacher's classroom. I didn't want anyone knowing why I was staying after class or asking questions that would result in me answering with a lie. I sat down at the desk near my two teachers and the psychologist, and we waited for my mom to enter the room. "Hello, sorry for being late," my mom said as she ran into the room and took a seat. My teacher stood up. "It's no worries at all." Within 5 minutes, they dove into detail about the results of my assessment. My teacher said, "Your daughter tested below average in every category." My mother looked at me sitting beside her and said, "Well, what can we do to address this?" The meeting resulted in my being enrolled in a special education program at each school I attended. My educational assessment followed me through elementary, junior high, and high school. I received extra time to take exams so teachers could help me read through passages. I was required to meet with a speech therapist and an educational counselor twice a week. Each time I was called out of class, my peers speculated where I was off to. Others who sat directly next to me knew where I would go because my teacher would say, "It's time to go see your special education specialist." My parents arranged for me to have a private tutor to assist me with homework. I was enrolled in after-school programs centered on academic success. It was honestly like being in school all the time. My mom went to great lengths to ensure I wouldn't remain behind my peers academically. She purchased every volume and variation of Hooked on Phonics. While I know I was extremely privileged to grow up in an environment concentrated on academic excellence, I hated being labeled a student with a learning disability. People automatically assumed I would amount to nothing. My parents feared I wouldn't go to college, and my family friends assumed I would end up modeling or acting. For the record, acting requires great memory, and modeling has its own set of difficulties. It was challenging having everyone doubt my capabilities, and it only resulted in me doubting myself. For a while, I stopped trying. I relied so heavily on my accommodations that I became dependent on the extra time and assistance. By the time I reached high school, I realized I needed to use less of my accommodations to ensure I'd survive college without them. I wanted more for myself than what people expected of me. As you conclude your final weeks and days as a senior, it is important to reflect on your journey thus far. Recall the progress you have made in your job hunt and graduation preparation, but more importantly, the progress you've made throughout your life in the past 4 years. How does it feel to be almost across the finish line? Did that D on your first exam as a freshman truly destroy your life? Did you think you would be where you are today? There are many questions you should ask yourself. Reflecting on your answers will make navigating future endeavors with discernment that much easier. I can assure you, no one, including myself, envisioned I would be where I am today. It's what allows me to be ambitious and positive about achieving grand visions. I always reflect on that moment in the third grade when I was diagnosed with my learning disability. My school district's label felt like a plague to my success, but ultimately it wasn't. So, chapter 7 continues to go on and talk about how important it is to be reflective on how far you've come. And this is something that I still practice. I've been out of undergrad for, oh my gosh, 4 or 5 years now. And then I went on to get my master's, and I've been out of grad school for 3 years. But I always take time to kind of think back to the moment where I really didn't think that I was going to amount to anything, honestly. And growing up in a predominantly non-diverse community, being a person of color, always feeling like I was being put down or led in a direction that was less prosperous compared to other people was something that I always had to battle with. But just being very reflective in the fact that I worked really hard to get out of the learning disability I was diagnosed with, and being able to write a book. There are people who I'm sure to this day are like, I can't believe you actually wrote a book. But whatever you set your mind to, you can do. And I know when you graduate from college, it's just really challenging to figure out where you're supposed to be in the world, what your placement is. Like, I need to have a job right now. And of course, I understand the stress of wanting to matriculate into corporate America as soon as humanly possible. But chapter 7 is really about understanding that it's a journey and you're going to find the right job when you're meant to find it. And you're going to be in the place that you're meant to be when you're meant to be there, if that makes sense. Are there any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
And yes, for those of you who joined a little bit after the first minute or two, if you have questions for Kyyah, ask them in the comments or the chat. So, and you can ask them at any point. So I have a question about like the principle, like, being proactive and being productive. You mentioned doing things, doing what you're supposed to do, or like,
Yeah, right. So, like,
setting
kind
the
of like what the steps are.
yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think about being proactive or productive? Because there might be people watching who are driven in
Or
some ways, but don't know exactly what
what
it
to do.
is. College is
Yeah.
the time to learn what you're
Yeah.
into. Not everyone knows, oh, I'm going to be a doctor or I want to be in bank. Not everyone knows that right away. So how can what would be your advice to do things that are productive and proactive without the piece of the puzzle that is the exact thing you're striving for?
Yeah. I guess I'll use an anecdotal response. First, I will say that the whole book takes you through everything that you're supposed to do. I give you checklists and tell you about internships that you should be looking for. And I think the main thing with college students is we're not really told to get relevant experience while we're in school, which is so weird to me. I don't know why that's not stressed. Like, it's the
Yeah.
craziest thing to me that it's not the most important thing. And that's one of the proactive things that I did when I was in school. I thought I was going to be a pediatrician. Clearly, I'm not. And I realized I didn't want to be one after I did a volunteer internship at Yale New Haven Hospital in the pediatric oncology wing. I was so sad. I was so depressed. And I realized that I just don't have the personality to be around sick kids all day. It's not who I am. So that was one of the things that I did was check stuff off the box. I started working in a pharmacy. I realized I hate retail pharmacy. And then each day I started to realize I don't want to work with patients. And it's not that I don't like people at all. I love people, but the problem with me is I get easily flustered with frustrated people. And part of being a healthcare professional, being a doctor, being a psychiatrist, or being anything in the medical field, a lot of jobs, you're interacting with people who are sick, or people who are frustrated, or people who have a problem. And obviously, when you're not feeling good mentally or physically, you're going to be frustrated. So a lot of doctors have to deal with that. And I never wanted that. So I realized that's how I ended up in public health, because public health is great because you treat at a population level. You're not treating individuals. So I get to still be in medicine, but not treat patients. And I realized that by that's the level of productivity that I mean. So another example is there are a lot of people who say, um, I'll use social media for example, because I think like content creation is like one of the biggest jobs out there. A lot of people say, I want to be a content creator, I want to be a content creator. And then they don't experiment enough with the kind of content that they want to create. So they're kind of just throwing darts at a moving board, if that makes sense. So it's like try to create content in one space and see if you like it. And if you don't, you don't. And there's a lot of aspects to content creation that people don't like, dealing with the social pressure, always feeling like you have to stay on top of trends, also not being in a mentally stable place and having to see everything being perfect in your world, because that's what content creation is. And that can take a lot out of you. So doing the level of proactiveness that I'm talking about is just trying trial and error, really.
Yeah,
I
no,
hope that
that
answers your
no,
question.
it does, that makes perfect sense. It's like it's very important to if you think you might be interested in something, there's no harm like, try it out.
Try it.
There's 5
That's what
things
college is for.
yeah, if there's,
And
like,
they don't
5 things
tell
you
you
can't
that.
change yeah, that's very true. Um,
And
yeah, you don't wanna get too far down a path that is ultimately not going to be for
not
you.
for you.
So we have a question here from Noelle or Noel, excuse me, whichever one. What helps you get out of your head when self-doubt trickles in? What do you think?
I know. I think what helps me with self-doubt, and it's taken years, so I wouldn't say that it's just something overnight where I'm like, "Yeah, I can handle self-doubt so easily," but it took me a long time to get to a point where I just don't have self-doubt as much anymore, and, there's this TikTok that I saw the other day, and this girl was saying, "Be delusional," like, l live in a be delusional, because happiness and like your success and accomplishments happen when you're being delusional or you're just like putting yourself out of your comfort zone. And I think what helps me with self-doubt is the fact that has problems, everybody has issues, everybody's dealing with something. Nobody is perfect, and in adding humanism back into how I experience things, it just allows for me not really to doubt myself. I don't know if that is a sufficient response, but yeah, just take a step back. Like a lot of times we just get in our heads and we're the only ones thinking that way. Other people around us may think you're doing a good job, but in our minds we're just like, no, I don't think so. Take a step back to kind of pick out why you feel that way and realize that everybody's experiencing the same things you are.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And while people think of further questions, I was wondering, Kaya, maybe you could just bring us through kind of the basic stages of the book. So what
Yeah,
people find if they buy the book, if they read
sure.
the book, kind of what's the journey we're going to go on here?
Sure. So in part one of the book, there are three parts. So the first part is called Forge Forward. And Forge Forward kind of gives you a background on like this phenomenon of graduating without a job and how we got into the situation as a country in the first place. And then it talks about the summer before you go into your senior year. So the book is really meant to take you on this ride of like, all right, I'm a junior now. I've just finished junior year. Like I don't really know what to do. I guess I'm just gonna like hang out for the summer until school starts. But no, the book is like you could hang out, but what you should be doing is interning or volunteering. You should be trying to figure out um what you want to do, and junior year is really where it starts. And another thing I talk about in the book in part one, or maybe it's part two, I talk about grad school. I tried to apply to med school at the end of senior year, and I didn't realize that in order to apply to med school and go right after you graduate from college, you have to start applying or like researching sophomore year. You have to take the MCAT sophomore year. You have to do your interviews. People are interviewing to get into med school already senior year of college, and I had no idea. So that's something that I always also talk about as a junior. Do you want to go to grad school? If you do, right after, you need to start thinking about applications and applying and all that. And I talk about not just going to grad school because you think it's the next step. I don't think grad school is necessary for 90% of people. I think people just use it as a cushion, and you don't end up using your grad degree anyway, and then you have more debt. So I talk about that as well. The book is very realistic and honest. It's everything that you should be told, but people are either afraid to tell you, or the college system just doesn't believe it's their responsibility. So then in part two, we go into senior year. Junior year's over, you've done your internship. Junior year summer, I'm sorry, going into senior year now. Part two is all about senior year. I talk about winter break, second semester, what you should be doing during spring break. My spring break, I had another internship, or I went home to try and find an internship because I couldn't find one. So I talk about a lot about unorthodox practices to getting internship opportunities, or to finding a job. And that means just walking in the door and asking for an internship. Sometimes that works. That's how I got my job in college. That's how I got my surgical internships throughout school. I literally just walked into a few offices and were like, look, I'm lost. And I know you were once lost too. So I talk about that, and just like, that's what I mean by being delusional. Some people are like, how did you just walk into the, I just did. And I was like, look, man, I don't know if I want to be a surgeon or not, but I would love if you could help me figure that out so I don't waste my time for the next 15 years. And the surgeon was like, yeah, why not? Like, you could stay for the whole summer and watch surgeries. I watched like 30 or 40 surgeries and realized I'm okay. I I don't want to be a surgeon anymore. And then that's when chapter 7 ends in senior year, and I do the whole savage solitude thing, because I think everyone in this era of career boss, like, everybody makes six figures, grind, grind, grind. People just forget to take a moment and be like, okay, first of all, nobody makes six figures overnight. And a lot of people who say they are is an exaggeration. Number two, not everybody's journey is the same. That's, the important thing. And in being in a generation that is so concentrated in social media, it's just so important for you to take a moment and focus on your journey and your growth and the prosperity that you've made. And I don't know if I put this in the book or not, but it's just important to be reflective and be realistic in this regard. Oprah Winfrey didn't become Oprah Winfrey till she was like 40. And there are a bunch of other people who are very successful that didn't reach those heights until recently. Jeff Bezos is a billionaire, trillionaire, whatever. No one knew what Amazon was 10 years ago. Nobody cared. Nobody knew what Uber was. Connecticut, and we did not have Uber or Lyft in 2013, 2014. So it takes time to reach that place of success. And that's what being a career savage is all about. A prepared graduate is recognizing that there are steps, but this book is your guidebook through the step. And then part 3 is facing reality. That's what it's called. And in that part, I talk about negotiating your salary, what it means after you finish school. If you didn't graduate with a job, it's okay. If you did, this is what you need to do. I talk about saving. I talk about, financial planning, paying your student loans, certain checking accounts you should have, investments that you should have. I talk about negotiating salary, 401k, all the things that I was never taught, but I really had to teach myself. And I didn't even know what the difference between a Roth IRA. I was like, what is this? And who cares? But I talk about that in the book. No one cares. And like, who cares? 401k, I'd rather just have the cash now, or like a financial, like a HSA, and how important that is, or even picking the right healthcare plan between an HMO and a PPO. I was like, it's not registering with me as long as I can go to the doctor, but it really is important. So the book is like the ultimate guidebook for transitioning in your career, but also just like as a professional as well, and becoming like ultimately well-rounded. I talk about starting a business if you want to, and not getting caught up in this girl boss, boy boss business era that we're in right now, where everybody has a business, but growing in your career and realizing you can reach that same amount as financial success in corporate America if you want to. You don't have to start a business to reach that level of success. And actually, most people who have that financial success work for somebody else. So that is like the book in a nutshell.
Thank you. That was great. Can you? We have a comment here from Vanessa. Let's normalize success in life at any point. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Um, so you talked a little bit about how post undergrad, were thinking about, you ended up getting your master's in public health.
I did.
So yeah, what's been your, for people who don't know, your background, like what's been your post college journey? So master's,
Yeah.
and then what have you been up to, and maybe tell us a little bit about Career Savage and everything.
Sure. Yeah, post college has been a whirlwind. I can tell you I've had more jobs than I could possibly count, to be honest with you. But I think that's really all about like the career savage spirit and not settling for less. And I don't think that everyone learns in the same way. So some people say you need like 2 years to master a job. I'm like, no, you don't. You need literally like 6 months, 3 to 6 months, and I'm bored. So that's what kind of has been my trajectory. Right after school, I went to go work at Yale Health Center, and I was doing public health work, working with the Department of the Connecticut State Department of Public Health and incoming international students, and educating on the importance of vaccinations like measles, mumps, rubella, varicella, verifying those documents. And then doing research on other like campus outbreaks that have happened, because a lot of the Ivy Leagues have had a few, and Yale had like this meningitis one. So they were really like just strict on like vaccination policies. And, you know, that's COVID probably has made their policies even stricter. But working there, I realized like, wow, this is actually kind of interesting. And I didn't know what public health was. No one ever even told me what it was, or that I could get a job in public health. So there was a woman who I was reporting to. She was a nurse educator there, and she also had her master's in public health. And we would have so many discussions because I would share my research with her about different outbreaks and how they handled it to prevent those outbreaks from happening again, and implementing like university policies from those research findings. And she's like, I think you would love public health. And I was like, okay, I don't even know what that is. She's like, this is it. What you're doing right now, like this is public health. And she's like, you should look for other opportunities or go and get your MPH. So I decided to apply for an MPH program and ended up going to Charles Drew in LA, where I live. And while I was at Charles Drew, I was working at Amgen, a pharmaceutical company in Thousand Oaks, working in regulatory affairs. And I've been working in regulatory since 2016. My first job was in Connecticut. After I left Yale, I went to Pfizer. And I realized that working in research and development is public health work, where I get to have a say in what happens to patients at the research level and the drug development level, but I don't have to actually work with patients. And that's when I realized I had found a job that was exactly what I wanted to do. Like, I get to impact communities that are important to me without actually having to talk to patients every single day. And it really was the instance of my career totally found me random. And that's why I say trial and error, because I worked in a pharmacy, realized I kind of liked in college, I worked in a pharmacy all through 3.5 years. And I realized I like the aspect of pharmacy and learning about medicines and how they work and stuff like that. But yeah, it was just always the patient facing side. So now I work as an associate director for a pharmaceutical company focused on neurological disorders. So that's been fun. I previously used to work for different companies doing like sickle cell research, oncology research, breast cancer, like hemophilia, different orthopedic issues like discogenic lumbar pain and all that. But I really do love my job. And as a biology pre-med major, I had no idea that I could be this impactful and have this type of opportunity. So I with Career Savage, that's kind of what I talk a lot about on my channel, is my journey in my career and how I got to this point. And I educate a lot about different jobs in STEM so that pre-med students don't waste as much time as I did. And I don't even think I wasted time because I really feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be, but that's where I am in my career. My MPH helps so much for me to understand what I do on a day to day. I use everything I've learned in my master's program every day at work. So,
Yeah, well, thank you. That's yeah, I mean, it's, completely different paths, but, like, that's kinda what happened to me too, of, like, I was an English major, and of course, what do? You either go get your master's in
yeah,
more
master's,
English
yeah,
or
yeah,
and I was, like, trying to work in publishing, which is, like, kind of the other main thing, and it
mm,
was, like, publishing, 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 and, like, bookselling as a part-time job, like, I accidentally realized
fell in.
that it was the perfect job for me, and I've been doing it for like a decade now. So yeah, so anyone who's out there
Trial and
watching,
error.
like it's these things happen. Oh yes, Vanessa says journalism major turned business owner here. Awesome. Um, yeah, so maybe going backwards a little to, go we talked about the way that the book is organized. For anyone who's watching who missed the part, junior year has come and gone. Junior summer has come and gone. What should they what's your best advice to someone who is hearing this and sort of feels like, "Oh god, I'm behind now." What's
Oh yeah, I talk about actually I say that in the book.
yeah, okay. So what
Buy
happened?
the book. I say that in the book. I'm like, if you are at senior year right now and you haven't done an internship or you haven't done any sort of experimentation, you just got to get into overdrive. It's really never too late. And you can honestly, like, I'll take a business majors are always the easiest ones because they can do whatever they want. It's like business major. But for example, a psychology major, you haven't applied for PhD programs or doctorate programs for psych because normally there's not much you could do with psych unless you go on further. What you should be doing is interning with psychiatrists. See if that's even something you want to do. Do you want to go to med school? Like that's a huge commitment, and it doesn't have to be like this extensive internship. It could be first month of senior year. You find a psychiatrist to intern with once a week, 4 hours a week.
Mhm.
And I guarantee you, in the first 12 hours in that month, you're going to realize whether or not you want to do it. If the work life balance is worth it, and having conversations with the psychiatrist, if you realize, this is not for me, end the internship and do something else.
Yeah.
Reach out to psychology majors who graduated from your school or psychology majors in different schools or just on LinkedIn, on TikTok. There are a bunch of people who make videos and just ask them like, what are some jobs you can get? There's a bunch of tech jobs that people don't even know about where you can be like a health advocate or a health and wellness partner. I didn't even know that was a job, but health and wellness partner is basically just making sure the people in the company are okay mentally, emotionally, physically, so that they can do their job well. That is something a psychology major can do. That's even something someone who has human resource as a major can do. So reach out to a tech recruiter and say, I saw the job description. This seems like something I'm interested in. So I think those are all things that you should be doing is just like talking to recruiters. I say that in the book, talking to previous majors, interning, and figuring out, okay, I have 9 months to figure out what jobs I'm going to apply to so that I can have a job by the time I graduate. And that's the whole purpose of the prepared graduate is to make sure that you graduate with a job that you actually like. And even if you graduate and you get a job that you don't love, that's fine. Like, you can work that job for 6 months, and while you're working that job, you go somewhere else. First job I had it for 9 months. Second job I had it for 3 months. Next job I had a year and a half. Job after that, year and a half. Next job, 3 months. So you're always pivoting and thriving into the next lane that you're supposed to be in, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Um, so yeah, I like that you brought up like, these sort of these places to look
Mhm.
for information, I think is worth pointing out because like you said, the way college is set up, it's not super career focused or practically focused, and that's sort of across the board, whether it's like a liberal arts school or a larger university for undergrads. It's kind of a problem everywhere. Um,
Yeah.
and but sometimes it's like that the resources are there, but they're like bizarrely not advertised. So you
Or inaccurate as
Yeah,
well.
like,
Just
so
like,
so you said, so reach out to people who alumni from your institution and, like, people who were in your major. How do people go about doing that if they are not sure?
yeah. Okay, I am obsessed with TikTok at this moment because I've been on it a lot recently. I swore it off. I was like, no, I don't want to get sucked into another social media platform. Like, it's too much content consumption on a screen. But honestly, there are so many people giving advice on TikTok nowadays, and so many people from different majors,
Mhm,
finance majors, psychology majors,
mhm,
art history majors, and talking about where they ended up and how they got into their field. There are even people who were in public health that are now in UX research, doing something completely different. Or a lot of people's goals now is just to work for a tech company, period, so they can have a remote job. So I think TikTok is a really great place to start. If I had to go in a list of where you can find information and how to network with people and go about it, TikTok is going to be number one. Just comment. Just literally leave a comment on the video that you're interested in the information, and they probably will reply, because the game of TikTok is to make more videos. So if you leave a type of comment that will allow for them to do a video reply, you're more likely to get a response. Then the second thing I actually would say is YouTube. I think that YouTube is a great source of information, and content creators that focus on their careers, they will almost always answer your questions, or they already have a video that has been created to answer your question. So if you just look up, like, I've made videos about like what to do with your bachelor's of public health. Here are the 5 jobs you can get. How to find a job in regulatory affairs, which is the industry that I work in. How to find an entry level job. Here are the job titles you should look up. So YouTube is going to be number two, and that's just, again, the comments. LinkedIn is number three. I think LinkedIn is great. You find recruiters on there. You find people, ex-alumni. If you can't afford to do like the premium profile where you can message people, just find the people that allow you to message them for free. The worst thing that can happen is they don't respond. The quote on this book, Lynn Pascarella, who's the president of the American Association of Colleges and Universities, I sent her an email, and I just was like, why not? I emailed her and I was like, would you like to review my book? And she responded and was like, yeah, sure, why not? I think this is great. Read the book, loved it, gave a quote. The worst that could have happened to me was her saying no, but she didn't. She said yes. And now her name is on the front of the book. So I think that's the one thing that probably plagues people is like, oh, they're gonna say no. Be delusional.
Yes, absolutely. That is true. Well, you mentioned remote work, so I think we need to talk about that a little. Yeah,
How
that
to find a
has
remote
probably
job.
changed. So obviously, it's something that's desirable, although not everyone feels that way. But
Hmm.
some of the reasons why it might be desirable beyond just like it being nice to be in your own space is I'll give just an example for the book industry is the pandemic sort of proved that a lot of jobs in publishing, which for those of you who don't know, like that industry is heavily concentrated in New York City. Um,
Hmm.
there are other cities, including Minneapolis, that have many great publishers, but you for the majority, for like 99% of the jobs, if you wanted to do entry level, you had to move to New York and you
Yeah.
had to live there and go to work every day on a assistant in publishing salary, which is not
Insane.
it's not right. So one of the things that happened in 2020 was it became sort of obvious that a lot of those jobs can be done fully remotely,
Mm.
and most of them can be at least done with some sort of hybrid scenario. So that industry is going through some reckonings and some changes, and I imagine that's happening kind of in a lot
everywhere.
of cases too. So, what would be your advice to someone who's looking for stuff in their field, but wants to sort of make that a priority, make that known in their job search of like, I am looking for this flexibility in order to be able to work from where I need to be, whether
It
that's
depends on it's gonna depend on the industry and the team, because I know I have a lot of friends who work in finance, like the
Mhm.
Goldman Sachs, McKinsey's, Bloomberg. They don't care.
Oh yeah, no.
They do not care. And if you even dare say, "Oh, well, I don't want the job unless it's remote and you're entry level," they're gonna be like, "Bye." Do you know how many other people are willing to move to New York for the amount of money they're gonna be compensated, for just to work on site? So I think that it's gonna really depend on your industry, because if your industry is extremely competitive, wherein there are a lot of people who wanna be in that field and there's a limited amount of jobs such as finance and working for, like, the top 5 finance firms, you're just gonna have to make that compromise in
Right.
the fact that if you really wanna work, because if you're a finance major, you don't have to work in private equity or for one of these firms. You can go be an accountant or do finance for a regular company and get remote job that way.
Mhm.
But I honestly think that, and I mentioned this in my book, that there's levels of reality that people need to put into play to where you are.
Yeah.
Some people graduate college and I respect the competence, but some people graduate and feel like they deserve $250,000 salary, remote job with no experience, never had an internship. No. It's a point where you're gonna have to give and take and be realistic. And I wasn't always remote. I became remote before the pandemic actually. So I started working remote in 2019. But it took a long time for me to get there. Like I
Mhm.
worked all throughout college full time in my field, and then I also worked in Connecticut, which I'm from California, so I would prefer to be in California, but I couldn't be. So my
Mhm.
first job was in Connecticut, and I was driving an hour to work every day. And I-95 is the worst because if one accident happens, you're on the I-95 all day. And then I moved to California, and the next job that I got, I was driving 3 hours to work one way in LA traffic. And I hated it, but I had to do it. But
Mhm.
now I have the experience to say, I've been in my industry for 6 years. I don't take any job that requires me to be on site, and that's just a non negotiable. And I'm comfortable to decline a job that won't accommodate. But
Right.
also in my industry, there's not a lot of people, but there
Mhm.
are a lot of jobs, especially with COVID.
Right.
Everybody's looking for someone who has experience working with the FDA and other health authorities, and there's not a lot of people. So it just depends on your industry, your experience, and just recognizing where you are in your career to make certain demands.
Yeah, no, I think that is a great point, and I think that is something I had a question about as well. Of there the reality section of your book of here's there is like an interesting like reshuffling going on of like there are a lot of ways in which uh, people seeking jobs and workers have um, power at the moment in some senses,
Yeah.
and but there are also ways in which there is like this reality of it's not just give me $250,000.
It's so
So
funny to me when I used to
yeah,
have clients who'll be like, "Yeah, I'm looking for this amount of money." I'm like, "What?"
yes,
Like, there are VPs who are literally dinosaurs that don't get that much compensation for your industry, and where you live is also another
right,
huge proponent of how compensation is generated for certain roles.
yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so I think with that in mind, there is still, if you need to move on from a job, you do, like you were saying, like some of your
Mhm,
jobs were a
yeah.
year, some of your jobs were 3 months. Do you have any advice about how to make that self assessment, make that call of like, how do I know it's truly not right? Or is it just, am I not understanding, the reality? Like, is this
Yeah,
job not right for me? Or is this just the way this job is,
is. Yeah.
and it will, I will adjust to it over time. And then also, if you do make the decision to move on, um, what are your best practices for that? How do you maintain those good relationships in order to further, you getting to the
Yeah.
next step?
It's funny that you, say how do you maintain those good relationships at a previous job, because I recently just came to the reality that you're never gonna leave a job in a good place, because they don't want you to leave. They want you to stay and do the job, and you're putting the team, at least in my industry, and people should assess this based on where they work, but you're putting your team in a difficult situation because now they have to last minute find someone to replace you, and until they can find your replacement, somebody else has to take on the burden of your workload. And it depends on the level that you're at, or how much work you're actually doing. But that is something that I realized is even if they would hire you back because you're such an amazing worker, it's still a situation of, you're clearly an ambitious person that's probably going to leave. So we're not going to hire you again because we don't want to
Yes.
be in that same situation.
Yes.
So that is something that I just learned. And I think it's okay. It's okay to move on. And if a company
Oh, yeah.
doesn't recognize that and understand that, it's fine. What has helped me assess when it's time for me to move on is if I'm bored.
Mhm.
I don't like to be bored at work because, I mean, what's the point? I wanna be, like, engaged in what I'm doing. I don't wanna feel like it's robotic and I'm doing the same thing every day and I'm kinda just in a slump. So, what I have realized is key behaviors in myself when I realize it's time, to move on for a job. One, I'm talking to everybody I know about how much I hate it. I think that's one thing. Two, I'm finding the need to like explore what else is out there. It's probably a time for me to leave. Three, if I don't like my manager or if I don't feel like I'm being managed, because I have a strong personality in my field as well. So I think, and I'm a highly independent worker. So finding the right pair with a manager, I outgrow my managers very quickly. And I think that's fine. And I feel like if I've outgrown my manager, I've likely outgrown the job because what's the next step for me?
Mhm. Yep.
If a company doesn't talk to you about promotions, and I've been there for like a year and a half, I feel like a year and a half is a good time to start talking about like promoting me, increasing my salary. Also, if I feel like I'm not being compensated fairly, I've had people who report to me get paid more than me and realize, okay, well, obviously I'm leaving because, yeah. So I mean, you'll know when you're ready to leave. And if you feel confident in your job and you're like, I do a really great job, I know I'm doing my job well. It's just, I feel like I've done a good job here. And it's
Mhm.
time for me to be challenged somewhere else.
Yes.
So the next thing I wanted to note before we move on is that when I'm applying to jobs, I apply to jobs that are like 1 to 2 years out of my experience level. Because why should I apply to a job that's at the same level that I am now? Like I
Mhm.
need to feel challenged. So some people might feel discouraged and say, well, the job says it needs like 10 years experience.
Right.
Well, I have six. So maybe in the next 4 years, I gain my 10 years of experience there. And that's how I grow as a professional.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. No, that's great advice. Um, and yeah, I agree. So are there any more questions? Vanessa, if you want to let us know what your business is, journalism major turned business owner, please do so. Um, I just want to remind people that the link to get the prepared graduate is in the comments in the chat. So if you want to head over to the Majors and Quinn website, that book is available. And I think maybe just final thoughts on the way out, if we don't have any
yeah.
more questions, is yeah, I don't know, what do you want to leave people with?
Um,
Inspiration.
I
Yeah.
I think, the theme of everything that I've said is, challenge yourself and just live in a state of reasonable delusion to, do whatever you want. Like everybody, we're all on the same journey of trying to figure out who we are and where we're supposed to be. And I think that where we are supposed to be is going to be ever evolving and changing as we grow as individuals. And I always say, like, I never cut off what the next steps could be. Some people are like, "Oh, where do you want to be in the next 5 years? I don't know, but maybe I'll be here, maybe I'll be there, maybe I'll write a second book, maybe I would have produced a movie by then. Who knows? But I don't cut off any possibilities just because I went to school for to be in biology.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that anything's possible, and I will always keep a part of my career close to science because I genuinely love it and I love advocating for people who look like me. But yeah, final sentiments are just like allow yourself to experiment because that's life is one big experiment.
All right. I feel inspired. So if everyone else on the job hunt right now is feeling similarly. Thank you so much, Kyyah
Thank
Abdul,
you.
for your book, The Prepared Graduate, for talking with us here today. This video will remain available on the Majors and Quinn Facebook page and YouTube channel. So if you want to send anyone our way, those of you who are watching, oh, hey, wait, P.S. Vanessa says, I'm in book publishing. Um, do you coach people who are mid-career, Kyyah?
I do. I coach people at all levels. You can go to my website, careersavage.com. I have like this 3-month plan package where I'll basically be your coach for 3 full months and I'll create a plan to figure out like where you want to end up at the end of that 3 months. So yes, careersavage.com.
All right. Well, yeah, Vanessa, head over there and maybe you and Kyyah can talk a little more. Thank you so much again. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your night, and good luck,
Thank
everyone.
you. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.